Have you ever found yourself marveling at those individuals who seem to command a room, to shift the very atmosphere around them, all without uttering a single word? It's like they possess an almost supernatural influence. They don't need to shout, they don't plead or beg. Instead, they employ a subtle yet profoundly impactful strategy. They withdraw. And just like that, almost magically, everything changes. The energy in their environment palpably shifts. People around them begin to question, to chase, to feel the void left by their sudden retreat. Now, pause for a moment and truly imagine, what if you could wield that same quiet power? What if, instead of instantly reacting to every provocation, every demand, every fleeting emotion, you chose a different path? What if you embraced silence when an automatic outburst is expected, or opted for a strategic retreat instead of an emotional explosion? What do you genuinely believe would happen? The profound truth lies in that very question. When you cease to be perpetually available, emotionally, physically, and psychologically, the world around you, the little ecosystem you inhabit, often plunges into a peculiar kind of crisis. This isn't because you're inherently disruptive, but because people have grown accustomed to navigating and often controlling you through your predictable reactions, your impulsive responses, and your established patterns. But the very day you decide to consciously withdraw, the entire game changes. Those who confidently thought they had you all figured out suddenly realize, with a jolt, that they know absolutely nothing about the real, complex individual beneath the surface. You've likely been conditioned, perhaps since childhood, to always be present, to respond with lightning speed, to please others, and to utter a yes, even when your entire being screams no. Society, in many ways, has subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, instilled the belief that your worth is intrinsically tied to how readily available you are to others. But here's a stark truth that seldom gets spoken with the clarity it deserves. This excessive availability isn't a virtue, it's a finely crafted prison. As long as you cling to the notion that you must be accessible at all times, whether emotionally or otherwise, you will find yourself manipulated, drained of your precious energy, and perhaps most painfully, forgotten the moment you are no longer perceived as useful. Consider why this happens. Being constantly available makes you predictable, and anything predictable can, unfortunately, become a tool. People begin to see you less as a person and more as an emotional emergency button. They press it when they crave attention, need relief from their own burdens, seek validation for their choices, and then, once satisfied, they place you back on the shelf, often without a second thought. You might not even realize this is happening because you're caught in the illusion that being there for everyone will somehow guarantee that someone, someday, will be there for you. But life and human nature rarely operate on such a straightforwardly reciprocal basis. The renowned teacher Shi Heng Yi spoke of the persona, the social mask we wear to be accepted, loved, and recognized. It is precisely this persona that often keeps you tethered to being overly available. You say, it's okay when you're internally suffocating. You reply to messages instantly, even when exhaustion gnaws at you. You find yourself explaining, justifying, and defending your actions as if you owe the world a constant stream of accountability. The sobering reality is that the more you position yourself as a supporting character on others' stages, the more you fade from the spotlight of your own life. This constant availability is a subtle, insidious form of self-abandonment. It's a disguised quest for approval, a desperate attempt to avoid rejection, and a fragile effort to control the image others hold of you. But this control is an illusion, and it comes at an enormous price. Your peace of mind, your vital energy, which you distribute as if it were an infinite resource, when in truth it is finite, precious, and deeply personal. The people who clamor for your constant availability in reality often don't want you. They want what you provide: validation, companionship, a distraction from their own lives, or emotional comfort. But observe what happens when you begin to change, when you establish a boundary, when you consciously refuse to react in the old expected ways. Those same people might become irritated, accuse you of being different, or even label you as weird. This isn't a reflection of some failing on your part. It's a testament to the fact that you've stopped being functionally convenient for them. And here lies one of the cruelest ironies. The more abundantly available you are, the less intrinsic value others tend to assign to your presence. Why? Because what is always in surplus often becomes, metaphorically speaking, an emotional rag. Few people truly respect what they don't have to earn, and even fewer genuinely value what is always unfailingly there. So, take a genuine pause now and reflect. Who in your life truly deserves your precious time? Who is worthy of your focused attention, your active presence, your empathetic listening? Or, to flip the question, who in your life might actually benefit and perhaps even learn something valuable from your calculated absence? But before we can fully answer that, we need to delve into something absolutely essential. Why do we react so much? Why do we give in so easily? What lies beneath this almost automatic conditioned desire to respond, to justify, to please? The answer, as Shi Heng Yi might suggest, lies in the concept of psychic energy. This isn't some mystical force, but the very real mental and emotional power that fuels our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Your energy is, in many ways, all you truly have. And if you don't learn to protect it, to consciously direct it, someone else will invariably use it, often against your own best interests. Shi Heng Yi didn't view the human psyche as a simple, automatic machine that just reacts to stimuli without any internal consequence. For him, our mind is more akin to an intricate energy system, and every single thought we entertain, every emotion we experience, and every action we take consumes a portion of that vital energy. The critical question then becomes, are you consciously choosing where your energy flows, or are you passively allowing the demands and whims of the world to dictate its expenditure? Each time you react impulsively, you're essentially squandering your psychic energy. When you feel compelled to defend yourself against a criticism that, in hindsight, didn't even warrant your attention. When you respond to a provocation merely to prove you're right. When you allow yourself to be drawn into pointless, draining discussions. When you strive to please those who consistently fail to value your efforts. In all these instances, you are spending your inner strength on things that offer no nourishment in return. Shi Heng Yi was quite clear on this dynamic. That which you resist persists. The more intensely you react, the more deeply you bind yourself to the source of that reaction. People who find themselves chronically emotionally drained aren't necessarily weak. More often, their energy is simply misdirected. And what happens to someone who lives in a state of perpetual exhaustion? They become vulnerable. When you're vulnerable, you become an easier target. Manipulative individuals, opportunistic personalities, and those who are emotionally needy often possess an uncanny ability to sense this vulnerability. They notice when you don't know how to guard your energy, when you react to everything, when you're constantly trying to fix the world or smooth over every conflict, and quite predictably, they take advantage of it. Shi Heng Yi posited that a healthy psyche is one that knows how to conserve and retain energy within its own system. This translates into practical skills, knowing how to say no without crippling guilt, learning to remain silent in the face of provocation without feeling cowardly, and mastering the art of observing a situation before rushing into action. True power, you see, isn't found in the speed or intensity of your reaction. It's found in the conscious choice of when and how to act. This level of discernment is only possible when you know yourself well enough to recognize your own impulses and triggers before they take control. Think about it. How many sleepless nights have you endured replaying an unresolved conversation in your mind? How many hours have you lost ruminating on what you should have said or trying to dissect why someone treated you poorly? This is your precious energy being siphoned away with no return on investment. You are, in effect, keeping alive ghosts that should have been laid to rest long ago, and feeding dynamics that only continue to exist because you insist on responding to them. Your psychic energy can be visualized as a force field. When it's well guarded and robust, it creates an undeniable presence. You can enter a room and command respect without uttering a syllable. But when it's poorly managed, diffuse, and constantly leaking, You become almost invisible, highly reactive, and fragile. And the world, unfortunately, often has little mercy for those who give in too easily. Therefore, begin the practice of observing your own triggers. What specific situations, words, or people make you react automatically? What makes you lose your center, your sense of calm? These are the very points where your energy is escaping, and that is precisely where you need to focus your work, not to become cold or indifferent, but to become selective, to become sovereign over yourself. And here we arrive at one of Shi Heng Yi's most profound revelations. When you consciously conserve your energy, you begin to break the projections that others habitually place upon you. This, understandably, bothers a lot of people because now we're venturing into a somewhat darker territory, that of silent manipulation. You might believe you're in control, that your reactions are conscious choices, but the truth is often more complex. Many of your emotional responses are, to some extent, programmed by past experiences and conditioning. Those who understand this, even intuitively, can manipulate you with surprising ease. Opportunistic people don't always need to raise their voices, issue threats, or force situations. They simply need to identify and trigger the emotional buttons you've left exposed, and you react, often in the same predictable way, time and time again. Shi Heng Yi called this projection, the psychological mechanism through which individuals unconsciously attribute to others the qualities, feelings, or motives they cannot or will not see in themselves. But there's another side to this coin. While others project onto you, you also become the receptacle for these images. And the more emotionally available and reactive you are, the more you become a blank canvas for these external projections. Consider that friend who only seems to reach out when they're mired in a crisis, or that partner who consistently needs you to swoop in and save the day, or even that acquaintance who showers you with praise, but only as long as you remain useful to their agenda. None of this is accidental. They are often not relating to the authentic you. They are relating to the idea of you, to the role you've consciously or unconsciously agreed to play. And why do you agree? Often, it's rooted in a fear of disappointing others, a fear of not being loved, or a deep-seated fear of abandonment. The most effective manipulation rarely occurs amidst shouting matches or overt power plays. It thrives in the quiet, insidious realm of guilt, when you feel an unspoken obligation to the other person, when you believe you need to be available, need to help, need to understand, even when doing so is slowly destroying you from within. Here's the crucial point. The manipulator doesn't necessarily need to overtly control you. They just need you to keep reacting in the same predictable patterns. But when you consciously stop reacting, when you begin to introduce no into your vocabulary, when you respond with considered silence instead of a torrent of explanations, when you choose to withdraw rather than justify yourself, the entire game breaks down. The projections they've cast upon you begin to crumble. The mask they've inadvertently, or sometimes deliberately, placed on you falls away. This sudden shift leaves people profoundly unsettled because they no longer know who you are. Even more uncomfortably for them, they are now forced to look at themselves, a prospect not everyone is prepared to face. Your newfound unavailability becomes a threat because it compels others to confront their own inner emptiness, the very void they were perhaps using you to avoid. The silence you offer in place of your usual engagement reveals the internal noise they've been desperately trying to drown out. And then, almost inevitably, comes the pushback, the criticism, the emotional drama, the accusations. This isn't because you are inherently wrong, but because you've stopped serving as their convenient mirror or emotional crutch. As Shi Heng Yi wisely stated, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you withdraw, when you cease to feed the cycle, the other person's shadow, their unacknowledged, less palatable aspects, begins to emerge. And this can be unbearable for those who have always relied on you as an escape or a distraction. But what about you? Are you truly ready to navigate the discomfort of being misunderstood, perhaps even rejected or attacked, for the simple act of protecting your own well-being and energy? Are you prepared to endure the silence that often follows such a rupture, the space that opens up when a familiar dynamic is broken? It is precisely within that silence, that initially unsettling quiet, that a new, more authentic kind of power is born. The modern world is incredibly noisy. Everyone seems to be clamoring to be heard, to respond instantly, to win pointless debates, and to prove their point, even if it costs them their own inner peace. Yet there exists a power that few truly understand and even fewer master, the power of silence. Not the silence born of passivity or fear, but a conscious, strategic, and brutally lucid silence. The kind of silence that isn't an absence, but an amplified, potent presence. Shi Heng Yi viewed silence not as a mere void, but as fertile ground for profound inner transformation. When you stop the knee-jerk reactions, you begin to truly observe. And in that observation, you start to see patterns that previously went unnoticed. Emotional repetitions in yourself and others, subtle manipulation games, cycles of self-sabotage. Silence allows for lucidity, and lucidity is a dangerous thing for those who thrive on controlling or predicting you. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to panic when you don't immediately respond, when you don't offer an explanation, when you simply quietly disappear from the usual exchange? It's often not because they genuinely miss you, but because your silence robs them of their narrative control. As long as you're speaking, explaining, reacting, you're still playing their game by their rules. But when you choose silence, you change the fundamental rules of engagement, and that unbalances anyone who depends on your predictable reactions for their own sense of equilibrium. True, empowered silence isn't just the absence of your voice, it's the mastery over your own energy. It's the deliberate refusal to be dragged down by someone else's emotional storms. It's the conscious choice not to engage in battles that are simply not worth your precious energy or peace. Shi Heng Yi emphasized that individuation, the profound journey of becoming who you truly are, your most authentic self, requires this courageous distancing. It's because only in the sanctuary of silence, free from the world's relentless interference, can you begin to truly listen to your own inner voice. But don't be fooled. This path of strategic silence has its price. It will inevitably distance you from people who only valued you for the role you played, for the convenience you offered. It will make you incomprehensible to those who only saw you through the distorted lens of their own projections. It might even make you appear cold, distant, or arrogant to those unaccustomed to such self-possession. However, all of this is merely the reaction of those who never truly wanted to engage with your depth, only with your utility. Herein lies a hard-earned truth. The more you mature and grow into yourself, the more selective you naturally become with your words, your time, and your energy. You begin to understand that each sentence spoken, each interaction engaged in, is an energetic investment, and not everyone, not every situation deserves access to your most profound truths or your most vibrant energy. Sometimes silence isn't a retreat, it's an act of sovereignty. It's the quiet language of those who no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone. Silence is uncomfortable for many because it forces the other person to confront their own thoughts, their own internal noise, their own unresolved issues. This discomfort, in turn, reveals far more about them than any argument or explanation from you ever could. You don't need to explain your absence. Your absence in itself becomes the explanation. And those who feel threatened by it inadvertently reveal just how much they depended on your previous imbalance to maintain their own sense of control or comfort. The most potent silence, however, isn't the one that merely disturbs the other person. It's the silence that reconstructs you from within. It's the silence that connects you to something deeper, something beyond the fleeting need for external approval. It is in this internal, sacred space, free from the clamor of others' demands, that you begin to recover your vital energy, to reconnect with your core essence. It's no use understanding all of this intellectually if, in practice, you continue to say yes when your heart means no. If you keep responding to messages that chip away at your peace. If you participate in empty conversations out of habit and maintain relationships that exist only due to inertia. Awareness without corresponding action is merely another, more sophisticated form of self-deception. True, lasting transformation begins when you make a firm, unwavering decision to become selective, and this requires unwavering emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability isn't about becoming cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It's about no longer being indiscriminately accessible to anyone at any time for any reason. It's about seizing control of your own energy, your own time, and your own precious peace. This profound shift starts with small, deliberate actions, not responding immediately to every ping and notification, taking a conscious breath before reacting to a trigger, choosing to leave a discussion before it drags you into chaos, turning off your phone without a shred of guilt, learning to say, "Not today, I'm not interested," or simply, "I won't get involved." And here's the most liberating part. You do not need to justify your absence. You do not need to explain your silence. You owe nothing to anyone in this regard but yourself. For many people, this resolute stance is unforgivable because when you refuse to explain yourself, you strip away their power to keep you confined within an emotional narrative where you are always the helpful, understanding, ever-accessible one. Shi Heng Yi understood that every genuine process of individuation often passes through a period of isolation, not a depressive, debilitating isolation, but a sacred, intentional isolation. This is a time of inner retreat where you relearn to listen to your own voice without the world's deafening interference, where you rebuild your identity not based on the gaze or expectations of others, but from your own authentic center. Want a reliable thermometer for your personal evolution? Observe who begins to distance themselves from you when you become more reserved and self-contained. Notice who tries to provoke you when you stop reacting in the old, predictable ways. Pay attention to who accuses you of having changed when you finally start to protect your own boundaries and well-being. These are not signs that you are doing something wrong. They are powerful confirmations that you have begun to truly free yourself. Being consciously unavailable is uncomfortable at first. You will likely feel guilt. You might think you're being selfish. You may hear whispers or even outright accusations that you're being too harsh or unfeeling. But this is all part of the deconstruction process. You have spent a lifetime being conditioned to put yourself second. It's only natural that such a fundamental change will cause discomfort, not only in you, but especially in everyone who benefited from your old, overly accommodating version. Conscious unavailability is the very foundation of self-determination. When you say no to the demands of the world that drain you, you are simultaneously saying a resounding yes to yourself. When you withdraw from a toxic environment, you are reaffirming that your peace is worth more than any false connection. And when you stop feeling the need to constantly explain yourself, you begin to earn a deeper, more authentic form of respect, even if it's from a smaller, more discerning circle. But not everyone is ready for this kind of potent, self-possessed presence. Your emotional absence will inevitably expose wounds in others that they do not want to face. It will reveal just how much they depended on your emotional chaos or compliance to feel in control or validated. It is at this critical juncture that ruptures may occur. And with rupture can come pain, loneliness, a sense of estrangement, the feeling that you are losing something when in fact you are simply liberating yourself. But what happens after that initial discomfort? What emerges from the silence, from the distancing? When you finally stop being available to everyone and everything, something profound begins to unfold. First comes the silence, that initially uncomfortable quiet that might seem to scream inside you. You'll question if you did the right thing, if you're being too harsh, if you're losing people who genuinely cared. But gradually this silence transforms. It begins to cleanse, to calm, to heal. And then often comes solitude. Not the aching solitude of absence, but the empowering solitude of total presence with your own self. This is the solitude of the strong, the solitude of one who no longer betrays themselves simply to keep others close. In that newly created space where there was once confusion, clarity enters. Where anxiety once reigned, peace takes root. Where neediness once drove your actions, a new kind of strength emerges. The strength of being whole, complete, and self-sufficient within yourself. As Shi Heng Yi articulated, the process of individuation requires you to distance yourself from the collective mindset, to disidentify from the social mask, and, for a while at least, to walk your own path, alone if necessary. That is precisely what you are doing when you decide to become consciously unavailable. You are not fleeing the world, you are courageously returning to yourself. It is at this pivotal point that you stop being merely a reactor to external stimuli and become a conscious creator of your own experience. You cease to be shaped by circumstances and begin to shape your reality from a place of inner alignment. The people who feel uncomfortable with your newfound absence simply reveal that they never truly wanted you. They wanted the role you played. And now that you no longer fit that prescribed mold, they don't know what to do with the authentic you. And that, my friend, is incredibly liberating. You will lose some people, yes, but you will find yourself. You will distance yourself from certain places and dynamics, but you will reconnect with your core essence. You may become misunderstood by some, but finally, you will begin to be genuinely respected. Because when you are no longer available for just anything or anyone, you become valuable, rare, and unforgettable. Make no mistake, this is a rebirth, a new beginning, the start of a life where you are no longer available for emotional crumbs, for manipulative mind games, for voids disguised as affection. Now, you only accept what truly resonates with your peace, with your truth, with your wholeness. If you've read this far, it's because a part of you is already stirring, already ready for this new empowered path. A part of you has already understood that being loved means nothing if, for that love, you have to abandon yourself. True self-love begins the moment you choose yourself, even if it means walking alone for a while into the quiet, powerful dawn of your own making.